NJC, PDP manipulation of court case. It's on page 4. And now at the bottom of Daily Sun, 9 die, 29 injured in auto crash in Niger and Lagos states. The stories are page 4 of the Daily Sun.
All right, so we'll take a look also at the front page of the Leadership newspaper. Immediately below the nameplate says UAE to invest in Nigeria's petroleum sector. UAE, of course, stands for the United Arab Emirates. And the lead story, it says Armed Forces Remembrance Day. That's the kicker. Nigeria will not witness another civil war, says President Muhammadu Buhari. And two riders, Bauchi declares January 15 public holiday in honor of Tafawa Balewa, who was Nigeria's first prime minister. Kogi governor promises more support for families of fallen heroes. And then another headline there, Uzodinma sworn in as Imo governor. With riders, Supreme Court judgment unfair. That's according to Ihedioha. Now the story says in part that at exactly 7:27 p.m. yesterday, Uzodinma was sworn in as the new governor of Imo State. Gunmen attack Emir of Potiskum's convoy, kill 6. That's on page 6. New ABU Vice-Chancellor emerges Wednesday. That's page 5. Presidential jet. Buhari did no wrong. PSC tells Afenifere. PSC stands for Presidential Support Committee. That's page 2. Trump impeachment. House sends case to Senate. And APC drags judge to NJC over Rivers Congresses. Page 11. Bayo.
Thank you, Kingsley. Yesterday was Armed Forces Remembrance Day, and the political leadership were at the National Arcade to lay wreath in remembrance of our fallen heroes. This was led by President Muhammadu Buhari, the Vice President, the service chiefs, and the leadership of the National Assembly. However, President Muhammadu Buhari on the occasion says Nigeria will not witness another civil war. He stressed specifically that citizens must ensure that the mistakes of the tragedies of our fratricidal war are not repeated. He says that federal government will remember the victims of the conflict, that is the civil war, and honor those on both sides who lost their lives, rather pay the supreme sacrifice for the unity of our country. He declared that the tragedy shall neither be forgotten nor repeated. In the statement by Senior Special Assistant Garba Shehu, the president said that the war 50 years ago is a potent warning on those who are harping on the dangers of aggressive regionalism, ethnic baiting, and political corruption. He said we must forge a common memory of a bridge to the future free from ravages of sectarianism. We will remember the sacrifices of our past heroes, and we should learn lessons to carry forward for the pursuit of peaceful coexistence. It's also very instructive that the president of the Military Widows Association, Mrs. Veronica Aloko, she made some touching statement regarding the situation. And he says he urged Nigerians to refrain from making utterances capable of causing crisis. He said Nigerians continue to record critical loss, critical colonies of widows who do not bargain for war. Their loved ones were claimed in these wars that they didn't bargain for. He says, let there be peace and let peace reign in this country so that conflict can be avoided. That is very, very instructive. Hope Uzodinma was presented with certificate of return by the Independent National Electoral Commission, and when he arrived at Owerri, 7:23 p.m. yesterday, the Chief Judge of Imo State, Justice Pascal Nadi, administered the oath of office on his Deputy Governor, Professor Placid Njoku, and Governor Hope Uzodinma. After the swearing-in ceremony, which was held at the Hero Square, the Governor Uzodinma said he is going to look into the activities of his predecessors, Governors Ohakim, Governors Okorocha and Governors Ihedioha. He gave instructions that the permanent secretary must put stop to all contract agreements and also provide him details of all contract transactions. Well, a new life has begun for a new administration in Imo State.
Exactly, and that's what Nigerians witnessed yesterday. And he has a huge task, really, ahead of him, because already a government has started functioning in Imo State before he came in. And as he rightly said, that the permanent secretary should stop all contracts, because already some contracts may have been entered into by the administration of Ihedioha for the development of Imo State. And one would also like to suggest to him that, look, if there are genuine contracts, meant to develop Imo State, such contracts should stay, if it is primarily to bring development to that state.
Well, governance is a continuum. It's a change of baton. It's a race to develop the state. And the baton race means that one begins, another continues, and so shall it be till the end of time. But every one who has responsibility to lead an administration in the position of governor should know that he has a maximum tenure of 2 terms, 4 years, and he will go, somebody else will come. And governance should be continual, but should not be used as a vindictive venture against opponents. The past is gone, but what must not suffer is the development of Imo State.
Exactly.
Well, Imo State has, as it were, now joined the list of states that will have to conduct their governorship elections out of the regular cycle of general polls.
Yes.
That's right.
Is it effective?
Hope Uzodima's tenure started yesterday, January 15th. And his tenure, therefore, will end after 4 years.
Will it affect the election, or is it swearing in it's going to affect? Because,
this is election. It's the tenure. It's the duration of his tenure.
The tenure now will end January 14th.
And it's only after
4
that,
years. 4 years
that you can conduct a fresh election.
No, just hang on. His tenure starts on the 15th of January, which is yesterday, and it will end on the 14th of January 2024. Now, if Ihedioha had been in office, his tenure would have ended in 2023. So whatever period that Ihedioha has served now doesn't count for Uzodima. So he's now joined other states. We have, say, in the southwest, you have a number of states in the southwest, Osun, Ekiti, Ondo. And then in the south side, you have Edo State, you have Bayelsa. In north central, you have Kogi. And then in the southeast, you have Anambra. And now you have Imo.
If this continues like this, then of course the electoral cycle must have been seriously affected. Okay. Because what I was thinking actually is that yes, Uzodima said it yesterday, but when it comes to election, you should not move the election, of Imo State. It could be taken when the election that brought in Ihedioha was taken. No, perhaps the swearing in could be different. I was just constitutionally,
election should be conducted. It is 90 days. At least 90 days before the tenure expires. Right. And therefore that tenure must change. It cannot end May 24th as the other one will normally. Yes.
But the election can be held and ask the person to stay up to
the period of the election is stipulated by law. So Uzodima, but of course that doesn't affect the elections into the state houses of assembly.
Exactly.
Yeah, but those ones continue to run along with
normal
the general cycle as we have also with the presidential election. But as you said, if we continue to go at this rate, we already have it down. Maybe at some point, following judicial interventions, we may have virtually all the elections taking place every year at different times. And then with the law enforcement agencies deploying 30,000 policemen and civil defense, to monitor those elections. And just, of course, some days ago, where they had a review of the security architecture for the elections, the INEC chairman, of course, complained bitterly as to how ineffective the current security arrangements are for the conduct of elections. So you cannot begin to deploy, men and personnel for ineffectual purposes. But this is what we are faced with, and that's Imo has now joined Anambra in the southeast.
Okay. Now, there's a story on eco-currency that the Nigeria and other Anglophone West African countries had a crucial meeting with respect to the one currency plan.
Well, the eco-currency was a broad plan of the ECOWAS community, of the 17 states of the ECOWAS community. But before a conclusion could be reached, because the governors of central banks of the communities have been working towards having ECO, that is a community currency, which has been long due. It was supposed to have come into, I think, about 2012 or thereabout. But they were working towards it, and there are certain conditions that had been set that all the nations in the 17 ECOWAS application must attain before the currency will come into effect. But as if pulling the carpet from beneath the feet of the community, some 8 francophone countries pronounced the establishment of ECO currency. And this ECO currency, like the CFA before it, is backed up by France. And this is what is causing apprehensions. I mean, initially, Ghana had even announced that it was prone to joining the francophone ECO that has been pronounced. But the francophone countries now have now come together to try and see that they will look at what the francophone countries are looking at, what ECO was originally planned, and see the middle way about it and see how they can harmonize that. But it is very, very critical that the parameters that were set by the ECOWAS community must strictly be observed. Otherwise, you can have some other states becoming surrogates of other foreign entities that can critically undermine the economy of the West African sub-region.
2 more parameters were even added just last week, and we had the conversation on that on this program, where it has become obvious that the francophone countries appear more prepared to start the use of the ECO currency more than the Anglophone countries, and that may have been the reason for this meeting to clear up all those encumbrances that you talked about. Of course, France backing it is a reason to be apprehensive.
Yes, it is indeed.
All right,
okay, now the editorial for today is coming from the Leadership newspaper. It's on the Remembrance Army Remembrance Day that we had yesterday. Now, as the nation honors fallen heroes, what is the opinion of this editorial?
Before I go to that, can I quickly draw attention to a story that caught my attention? In Cross River State, Governor Ben Ayade has appointed 90 more special advisors. This brings the 200 such appointments since inauguration in May. The report also adds that in his first term, he had about 300 such appointees. And he says that the initiative is to ensure that governance is taken to every cranny and nook of Cross River State.
Well, that is not unexpected. He has a budget this year, which he christened budget of Olympotic something metamasses. I can't remember the last word. And he also had a budget of so kinetic stuff. So probably this will enable him realize the Olympotic ambitions in his 2020 budget. But actually,
it's one of the states with the highest budget. It's trillions now.
Well, yes,
And
it's not amongst the richest states in the Federation.
Yes.
I mean, rich states such as Lagos, Rivers, and Kano aren't that ambitious. But you ask yourself, when he had the budget of kinetic transformation or whatever it was christened, what was the performance of that budget?
Maybe he has a huge financial base or revenue base, in the state, apart from the budgetary allocation at the federal level. He may have a large revenue base, down there.
Cross River lost some of its oil revenues to Akwa Ibom. And since then, there has been bold efforts to diversify the economy, and there's tremendous initiative in areas of agriculture, particularly in the area of rice, rice cultivation and rice seedlings.
They have mechanized
a very huge mechanized system.
That is the reason why you would now appoint so many special advisors to be on your payroll.
He's making money to pay them, and what we'll be talking about is are they going to do? Are they going to work for him? And if the work they're going to do is going to be effective, towards developing the state, that's what is important.
How many special advisors does President Buhari have?
See,
who has a national project?
Okay, Abayo, Armed Forces Remembrance Day.
Well, Armed Forces Remembrance Day is the ceremony every 15th of January for Nigeria that we honor our fallen heroes, those who paid the supreme sacrifice to ensure that our nation is united. However, this was a carryover from what we used to celebrate at 11/11, that's 11 November of every year. As a British colony, we were then marking the end of the World War in 1918. But our leaders felt that what we ought to homely remember is the end of our brotherly war, which ended 15th of January 1970. And that is why the Armed Forces Remembrance Day is there. But this editorial is happening on the fact that there are still persons who have suffered loss of their lives and their dependents they left behind from Boko Haram and from other security challenges are yet to be paid their compensation. And that reminds us of that earlier pronouncement I made by the president of the Military Widows Association, Mrs. Veronica, and she was specifically saying that let peace reign in this country and some of this conflict that we go into can be avoided. I say we are paying the price of what we never bargained for. Our husbands never bargained for war. Wars that wars usually aggravate the pains and should be avoided. And that is why we are preaching for peace. So she is calling for peace, and the editorial is happening on the fact that if the sacrifices of these our fallen heroes to be meaningful, their dependents they left behind should be catered for.
All right, at this point, we'd like to appreciate Bayo Atoyebe's analysis this morning and expect to have him again back tomorrow when we shall bring a fresh edition of Good Morning Nigeria. Bayo, thank you indeed.
Thank you too.
For coming. You're watching your breakfast show, Good Morning Nigeria, on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we get back, we shall continue with the second part of our conversation on 50 years after Nigerian Civil War. Never again.
Are you a business owner struggling to find your way? Smithen is the answer. The Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency of Nigeria is here to help you succeed and gives you entrepreneurship training that will make your business grow big. It can create access to finance. Smithen can help you prepare a good feasibility study and link you up with the finance institutions that will fund your business. It can also create access to market through local and international trade fairs, opportunity fairs, and exhibitions. Smithen also organizes programs to identify innovative entrepreneurs and promote their business ideas. For further information, contact us at Plot 35, Port Harcourt Crescent, Area 11, Garki, Abuja, or visit our website www.smithen.gov.ng or any of our state offices in the 36 states of the Federation.
Nigeria is our country, and it's the only country we have. Irrespective of religion, tribe, the heroes of our past did their best to take Nigeria to where it is today. It will be unfortunate, I repeat, unfortunate, absolutely, if we don't keep Nigeria intact. We must put our differences behind. We must let everybody know that human beings cannot live together without some differences. But at the end of the day, our country is Nigerian. It must always come first.
Get ready for the Unity Challenge reality TV show. Coming soon.
As you know, kids' exam time is exam time for moms too. The child prepares intensely, so does the mom, taking care of every little thing. But germs can ruin it all. What if he falls ill on his exam day?
Every single day is important for kids. That's why they need Dettol soap. It protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs.
Everyday protection, everyday Dettol.
65 grams, now 150 naira.
We have come to the end of another successful year, and we wish to appreciate all those that mean so much to us. Our sponsors, our clients, government at all levels, corporate bodies, advertisers, religious bodies, civil society groups, political parties, and above all, you, our esteemed viewer. Together, we made 2019 great. Together, we shall make 2020 even greater. That is why we say, thank you. This is wishing you Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, before we begin the second part of our conversation on 50 years after the Nigerian Civil War, Never Again, let's listen into excerpts from the first part of the conversation which took place yesterday. And here is our correspondent, Abdulsalam Jibrin.
Some people are living on hangover of the war. Either you want to situate somebody from a different ethnic group where he could have been better for the country. You say no, he's not from the ethnic group. Let's exclude that. If the Germans had a hangover of the Second World War, they wouldn't be number one in Europe today because they were able to wash off the past and move forward.
We need to remind ourselves that in the current challenges, in our frustration, we shouldn't reopen old wounds, which more or less, I think it was the former Anambra State Governor Obi, with the burial of Ojukwu, he said that we have already put an end to the story of the Civil War. Of course, that doesn't mean we shouldn't forget. I mean, we should never forget, but we should move ahead to build a nation.
The best way to remember the Civil War would be to roll back and to ensure that we did not have to resort to conflict, to armed conflict, to resolve political or economic or social problems.
When the war started, there was a lot of confusion because I grew up on Lagos Island. I was born there on Lagos Island. And a lot of confusion, especially around the market area, the Sangros market, Tunumbu area, and so on, because the Nigerian army was trying to mobilize. So there was some chaos, I noticed, because people who never wanted to enter the army were being forced to be, mobilized.
And now joining us for the conversation segment of the program, here in Abuja studio, we have General Ahmed Tijani Jibrin. He's a former Director of Military Intelligence. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning and thank you for having me.
And from Benin studio is Professor Benson Osadela. He is a Professor of History and International Relations at the University of Benin. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, nice being here today. Happy New Year.
All right, sir, thank you. And now we will go to Kano, where we have Professor Omar Pate. Omar Pate is a Professor of Mass Communication and Dean, Postgraduate School, Bayero University, Kano. We thank you for waking up with us this morning.
Good morning, Nigeria, and good morning, NTA Studios in Abuja.
All right, thanks a lot. Now, joining us via Skype from New York is General Chikadibia Ubiako. He is an Army general who fought in the Civil War. He is currently on UN Secretary General assignment as the head of the board of inquiry into incident in northeast Syria. Good morning and welcome. I don't know what the time is in New York, but of course here it's morning. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kilian. Thank you.
All right. So, gentlemen, once again, I'd like to have you in the second part of our conversation on 50 years after the Nigerian Civil War, never again. When we say never again, there is a presumption that we have learned lessons, or still learning lessons, from the 30-month-long Civil War, 67 to 1970. Beginning with the former Director of Military Intelligence, what, in your opinion, are those lessons that we have learned?
Well, I believe that there are a lot of lessons we've learned, and there are some lessons that we ought to have learned, but we did not learn. Now, for instance, anywhere you go in the country, especially when you are dealing with the elders who were alive during the Civil War, or those veterans who fought in the Civil War, you find out that there is general belief that nobody wants another civil war. because of their experience. Recently, some prominent Nigerians were interviewed across the board, including General Gowon, Pat Utomi, and Emeka Anyaku, and some other Igbo leaders were interviewed on this same issue. All of them have misgiving in one thing or the other regarding the General Gowon's program of reconstruction, rehabilitation, and so on. But all of them are unanimous in their belief that never again should we drag our nation to a situation whereby civil war will become an attractive option. So to that extent, we can say that some lesson has been learned, because those who felt it, those who are there, knew that it will never be an option to resolve political disagreement. There must be some other pacific way, more civilized way of dealing with the situation. Then another important thing that I can say is part of the lesson learned or effect of the civil war. Looking at the way, for instance, the Igbos are, they are highly enterprising people. They are people who are up and doing in terms of commerce and industry. If you look around immediately after the civil war, almost 100% of the Igbos were in the east. But if you go around now, you find out that they are back in multiples. Every corner of this country you go, you see an Igbo person doing one thing or the other to survive. Apart from that, there are also people from the north who left the east as a result of the civil war. Most of them are back there now. And the creation of Abuja also helped matters to further integrate people and make people to forget about what is happening. We have a common capital that is a rallying point for national unity. But the aspect of the lesson I felt that has not been learned is that still there are some of our religious leaders, political leaders, traditional rulers, and some NGOs and civil society organizations. When you hear their utterances on national issues, you will not believe that they were Nigerians. They talk and mention all kinds of things that will remind us, that will bruise again the wound of the civil war. They talk on issues that are so sensitive and they are so flippant. They talk anyhow. And clearly, this is something I can say is part of the lesson we didn't learn. Because events leading to the civil war indicate clearly that there are a lot of disagreement, there are a lot of rumors, there are a lot of what you call now fake news, and so on. But up till now, we still have this problem of fake news, of news that will mislead people, instigate people, and make people feel as if they are not part of the same country.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, we'll give you time, in the course of the program to, of course, dissect some other areas of this conversation. But now let's go to New York, where we have General Obiako. General Obiako, you participated in the war, and this is hoping they are going to bring your experience to bear as we discuss the lessons learned from that war. In your opinion, what are those lessons? And what are we going to guard against, as the nation, moves forward?
Thank you very much, Kirian, for asking that fundamental question. I hope that the purpose of this program is to tell ourselves the truth so that the truth will see us forward, see us progress. I think 50 years is a long time. Indeed, I participated in the war. I fought, I got injured 3 times on the Biafran side. I ended the war as a captain in Biafra. That is, by the way. The fundamental issue here is that most times we forget what we want to achieve. we want to grow a nation. If you can all remember, 2 years after becoming a republic, this nation crashed. This country crashed. 2 years after 1963, October. From 1965, we have problems. Eventually, it continued until the Civil War, 67, and ended up 1970. Now, the question is this. You cannot cure a disease until you diagnose it. You have to diagnose the disease. And then you can cure it. We all know what we want. We want to build a nation. But we need to know what if caused the Civil War. It is because we did not find out what caused the Civil War, and subsequent steps we did not take. That is why we're having the problems we're having today. If I may just give you some little gist about it, what I mean. We did not, seriously, consciously determine the real cause of the Civil War, because it is, most of them are still what is wearing their heads. And we were being cosmetic. Being cosmetic. I remember I was the director, higher military organization in War College. We used to organize Civil War seminars. The last one I organized was in 2000. And all we discussed was the theatrics as against what caused the problem. Because if we had addressed what caused the problem and we learned from what caused it and passed on the information as regards war to these generations who left behind, we wouldn't today be talking about anybody going to war. Nobody will be talking about it. There are benefits of war. Can we say we derived anything from war? Look at what happened in terms of technology. Both sides, science and technology. What did you make of it? 50 years. And it is in history that countries that go through wars do what? Take a leap. So we must do the needful. We must be courageous enough to look at issues and find solutions to them. And then, of course, grow our people. Nigerian people are wonderful people. The reintegration we're talking about, people moving around and the rest of them, it's not government that did it. People did it. They love themselves. The masses love themselves. But the leadership must find the political will, must be courageous to address fundamental issues. And not, doing things cosmetically, and leaving at that. I will talk more on other issues. But before I talk on other issues, let me use this example too. If we had learned anything from the Civil War, we should have learned how to mobilize for emergencies. We should have learned how to deal with Boko Haram and other security problems. How do we do it during the Civil War? That we have forgotten completely, that we cannot do it now. I'll stop this far. Thank you.
All right, General Biako, thank you very much there for your opening salvo. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. Let's go over now to Professor Mauro Pate, who is with us from our Kano Network Center. Professor Mauro Pate, give us a sense of what your perspective is when we say 50 years after the Civil War, never again. Are we on course?
No. Thank you very much, Kingsley. I think mere statements from political leaders will not be enough to reassure the rest of us that all is well with the Nigerian unity. You see, we cannot just take things for granted. The way things are, we need to put our acts in order 50 years after the Civil War. One would have thought that by now we are not talking about whether Nigeria should remain as a nation or not. We shouldn't be talking about issues relating to our diversity. Rather, we should be talking about how can we consolidate on our achievements in terms of science and technology, in terms of our agriculture, in terms of our education. But what are we doing? We are still talking about whether we are a nation. You could still hear people talking about marginalization in almost every sense of the word. You could still see insurgency. You could still see pockets of deprivations, increasing poverty, serious corruption, and maladministration all over the place. And all these are symptoms of a decayed system, symptoms of a nation that has failed to learn from history of its own making, as well as history in other places. And what are we saying here? After the Civil War, we developed structures to ensure the unity of this nation, to ensure that everybody is given a fair sense of representation. And that is why we have a federal system. And in the federal system, you have a unified military, for example, a bureaucracy or a civil service that unites everybody. You have educational system that is also federal in nature and is supposed to cater for everyone. We build universities where we said admissions should be based on giving everyone a sense of belonging. But what do we have today? We have universities that are just mere local government centers where all the staffings, all the students are from the same locations without knowing anything about the rest of the nation. And if you look at our media system particularly, at a point we had some federally looking media organizations. But today, the system has also changed. If you could remember some few years back, every state by 4 o'clock, 7 o'clock, or maybe will hook onto the NTA, will hook onto the FRCN for the network news so that everyone will get to know what is happening in the nation. But today, many of our states no longer even hook onto the network news. And that's on radio. Then our bureaucracy is also increasingly being localized. Even at the federal level, there are some ministries that if you go, they are aligned to certain indigenous group in this nation. Then our telecommunication system, of course, that one is good enough because of the advent of the internet and the GSM. Then transportation. Roads were built to ensure that every Nigerian can move at ease from one point to the other so that we get to know the nation very well. Again, because of insecurity today, people can no longer move. Moving from Kano to Abuja, for example, has become problematic. You can no longer move with ease and confidence from Kano, for example, to Lagos and get to know the nation very well, either because the roads are just terrible or the security system is not assured. So by the time you look at all of these things, now take the issue of corruption, which deprives people of their resources, take the issue of poverty, take again the issue, like I've said, of maladministration, where some people in some parts of the country are not given a fair sense, either in terms of appointments or other friends and families are only those who are appointed in some sectors of government. All these things add up to the frustration of the people. At the end of the day, we are taking the unity of Nigeria for granted. And we shouldn't do that. If Ethiopia could disintegrate into the other part, if Sudan could disintegrate, if we look at what happened in Eastern Europe, then it is an indication that mere statements from our political leaders saying that there will no longer be a civil war in Nigeria shouldn't be enough. Especially now, if you look at the media dimension of it, we need to prepare ourselves and also teach the history of the civil war to our younger people so that they could see the credibility in the teachings that we do and take lessons. But as it is, I'm not sure if our leaders are guiding us right.
Okay, Omar Pate. Let's go to Benin now, where we have Professor Benson Osadolo, who is a professor of history and international relations. Professor Osadolo, yesterday, most of our guests actually harped on the fact that many nations sprang up in terms of development after Civil War. America, for instance, had the fiercest Civil War during their own time, but it came back, and of course today is a major force globally. Now, what are the lessons you think we should draw from this with respect to Nigeria, and of course how the nation can also go forward doing so?
Thank you so much. In the first instance, when nations go to war, for example, an eternal civil war, like a civil war, the implication is that brothers have been at war. And at the end of that war, they're thinking of how to reconcile themselves, how to rehabilitate themselves, and of course, how to reconstruct the aftermath of the war as a result of damages caused by war. If you look at the United States, from 1861 to 1865, they had a bitter civil war, which was very prolonged. Immediately after the war, there were three plans. The first plan by the first leader, a second plan that followed, and a third plan that followed, all about reconciliation after the war and building the American nation. If you look at Spain, unfortunately, the civil war in Spain ended in 1939, and then the Second World War started. And you could see the plans towards reconstruction and towards rehabilitation of Spain after the war. In the case of Nigeria, at the end of the war, there was also a plan which was put in place by the Gowon regime. And this is what we know in history as the three arrows: reconciliation, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. But more importantly is that we have not been able to address the issues which led to the outbreak of that war. Otherwise, by now, from 1970 up to today, which is 50 years after, we should have had subsequent plans by different leaders, or a kind of national development planning for the nation that will address specifically issues of nation building. When it comes to nation building after war, there are two critical issues. Number one is development, the building of critical infrastructure, because war would have damaged buildings, would have damaged bridges, would have damaged roads, would have damaged some other facilities. And so we began to rebuild the critical infrastructure and, of course, expand on existing one and modernize. The second is the issue of integration, which is very critical in nation building. In other words, at the end of war, how do we now create a kind of national identity among the citizens? How do we create a kind of national character among the citizens? How do we create a kind of national consciousness among the citizens? How do we create a kind of national outlook among the citizens? How do we make Nigerians believe they are Nigerians? Don't forget, one of the critical issues that led to the outbreak of that war, Nigerian Civil War, was ethnicity. Today, we are more ethnic conscious in Nigeria than having a federal outlook, because we have not been able to develop on the gains of the war to rebuild our nation. Again, let us look at one of the issues again that led to the outbreak of the Civil War, political. This has to do with the imbalance in the federal system. Today, we have over-centralization of the federal system. And different parts of the country, they are clamoring for true federalism, which means at the end of the war, 50 years after, there is nothing like federalism. The kind of federalism that we have in Nigeria does not exist anywhere in the world. Others argue that, look, I think this is peculiar to Nigeria, and Nigerians should work within that framework of their own federalism. It's wrong. Federalism has its own theory. Federalism has its own issues. Federalism has its own framework. In other words, there are paradigms that you can advance to building your nation when you go through war. And we have not been able to address all of these issues in Nigeria. If you look at the Nigerian Civil War, it ended in 1970. We had General Gowon from that time up till 1975. Then Murtala Mohammed came. And then, of course, Obasanjo came.
Then, of course, Shiru Shagari came. Then, of course, Shagari was overthrown. Buhari came. Then Babangida came. Then Absalam. Then, of course, we have Basajo coming again. We've had a series of leaders. Can we adequately explain their own vision about nation building in Nigeria today? That is one aspect. Since 1970, when the war ended, we seem to have more powerful individuals in this country who are leaders rather than powerful institutions. In other words, we have also critically failed to address the issues of state building in this country. This can be explained as a result of military intervention following the institutional crisis within the military. But beyond that, we've had the rise and fall of Second Republic, the rise and fall of the Third Republic, and now we have a staggering Fourth Republic, where individuals are more powerful than institutions. So when we look at lessons of the war and issues of development, how have we been able to develop our institutions? You see, it's not a question of, oh, this is what we are doing, this is how we want to address the problem. How powerful are these institutions? So these are issues, these are questions that we should address. Don't forget, issues and problems which led to the war derived from the crisis and conflicts of the period. In the past 50 years, this country have had a major problem of insurgencies in the Niger Delta, in the eastern region, and now, of course, in the northeast. Have we been able to address the problems of these insurgencies? And of course, the kind of insecurity that has enveloped this country, a nation called Nigeria. At the end of war, we felt perhaps the issue of insecurity which led to the war would be a priority with government. Today, government has not been able to demonstrate that lives and property can be secured wherever you are in any part of the country, from Sokoto to Port Harcourt, from Lagos to Maiduguri. Life is not secured. Is it that you travel from Kaduna to Abuja or Kaduna to Kano and you are sure of your safety until you arrive? It's not so. News reports just this week, convoys, that were ambushed and persons were killed. You are wasting lives. Government does not seem to reflect on that problem of insecurity. You cannot build a nation after war when the nation is not secured. The people are not secured. Their businesses are not secured. That political problem itself affects the economy of the nation.
All right. Thanks a lot, Professor Sadollah. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation, of course, along with the other guests. Let's come back to Abuja studios, where General Ahmed Jibril is still here with us, former Director of Military Intelligence. Well, again, since we're having, as it were, a historical excursion, some scholars would argue that, look, General Yakubu Gowon, after enunciating the 3 R's on the basis of no victor, no vanquished, did come up with a number of measures that were aimed at unifying the country. For instance, the NYSC scheme, which started in 1973. And then you also had an explosion in the number of unity schools around the country. And then, of course, for children who would now not probably realize, when you celebrate Children's Day on 27th of May, it was a creature of General Yakubu Gowon's administration. Plus, some other constitutional arrangements that we have seen. We saw that in 79. We saw attempts at that during the ill-fated Third Republic, then Abacha's own constitutional arrangements, plus what we see today, even though there are challenges with the operationalization of aspects of the Constitution. But from your point of view, have these institutional arrangements helped in welding us together and ensuring that we are able to, as it were, pull the same string as a united entity?
Well, you have mentioned quite a number of things which were put in place right from the time Gowon took over as the head of state, one of which was the National Youth Service Corps. The National Youth Service is a very important program for all the youths of the country, apart from the fact that it gives them a stopgap from the time they leave school and the time they start hunting for job. It also helps in integrating the people. Some of the co-members serve in places where they have never even thought of in their lives. So these are part of the achievements made, at least from that program. Then there are the other programs you mentioned that Yakubu Gon introduced, like the 12 states that were created. Actually, for a time, it doused tension because based on the agreement reached at Aburi, which was later to be reneged, a confederation was the arrangement that was reached at Aburi. And by the coming of Yakubu Gon to create the 12 states, it doused the tension. I know it did not stop the civil war, but it doused tensions. Then from there, you can start thinking in terms of the effort at good governance. Because government in, government out, if there is no good governance and strict observance of rule of law, there will be a lot of problems in the society. So as it is, now you find out that the preponderance of actions against rule of law has reduced to a large extent, bearing in mind that our courts are active, and anytime somebody has problem, whether he will receive justice or not, at least he knows where to go. So to that extent, I would say we have achieved something. And on good governance, if you look around, you know that the Nigeria of 1966 or 1970 is not the same as Nigeria of today. There are a lot of developmental projects which were executed in terms of roads, dams, and electrical installations to supply power across the country. Again, there are a lot of institutions that were also established which are helping in no way to further harness the effort the government is making at national integration. Now, beside that, we can also look at the effort of the government to introduce certain measures that will help in entrenchment of human rights. The National Human Rights Commission was created. It was not there before. It was created ostensibly to ensure that human rights are observed, even though there are infringements here and there. But the mere fact that it exists and it is functioning and funded by government, I believe, is another institution that come out as a result of the civil war. So with that, you look at school enrollment across the nation. I don't want to go into what happened to the product, but there is no doubt about the fact that with the arrangement government put in place, there are a number of schools, tertiary institutions that were created by government to ensure that our youths are educated. Now we have so many private universities, and these private universities are helping to take in those that could afford it, and those that could not afford go to the state-owned or federal government university. So all these are programs that I believe come after the Civil War, and is in line with the effort of government to ensure that everybody is given opportunity for education. Everybody is given opportunity to move around the country and participate in any economic activities that the person specializes in. So I believe we can say without any mention of word that even though there are still gaps, but a lot has been done to ensure the most talked about integration, rehabilitation, and national development.
Okay, thank you. Let's return to New York once more, where we have General Obiako. General Obiako, you, in your first comment, you talked about the inability of the nation to address what you refer to as fundamental issues, some of the fundamental issues that precipitated, the war that we are talking about. But currently in Nigeria, what appears to be a major source of concern is the inability of the ruling class all these years to strike a balance in the socio-economic and political equation of the country in terms of appointments, in terms of distribution of scarce resources, and in terms of course, recognizing that there are unemployment or there is unemployment in the country, and there should be also a way of creating employment by way of having the needed infrastructure in the nation. In your opinion, how would you advise the current administration to address some of these issues?
Thank you. In building a nation, one primary resource you must do something about is the human resource, without which every other aspiration or efforts will be thwarted. You need a quality human resource to build a country. And that is the first thing any government that wants to move from whatever bad state it has found itself has to do. I will still draw some examples from other countries that have gone through some very bad states now. Because without quality human beings, without inculcating in the people the fundamentals of certain values, is just like a body without soul. There must be qualities leadership should aspire, cultivate in the people. And one good thing about you have people who are ready to follow, but most times the leadership does not drive them towards a positive end. If we inculcate in our masses, people, give them a character, give them the soul, so that we can have identity, like the professor said. We have an identity. Right now, as we speak, who is a Nigerian? Who is a Nigerian? You can't say this is what a Nigerian is. No. We have no character. And when you address somebody, instead of telling you he's a Nigerian, he will tell you he's from one part of the country or the other. Because he has no sense of belonging. And that is one thing the leadership should have provided after the Civil War, so that we common patrimony, where everybody has a take, a buy-in, so that we can sing one song and dance one dance. But we don't have it. And if you don't do this, every other thing you're talking about cannot work. Let me ask a fundamental question. Tell me one institution in Nigeria today that is functioning well. Tell me. It is because of the quality of the human beings in the institutions. There's no common drive. There's no focus. And that is what the leadership is supposed to do. Indeed, I have said it several some other places. The only thing our leadership, when I talk leadership, whoever, the people that come into power anytime, learned is what the British did to us. Divide and rule. That's all. We have not built a people so that you can give them direction and they move. A glaring example is what happened in Rwanda 25 years ago. We never saw that type of disaster. But what is it now? What is it now? In what category of human development will we say we are equal to them? We don't have it. Countries that have even the largest number of linguistic groupings in the world, Indonesia, India, and all, they have an identity. So leadership must dream Leadership must have vision. Leadership must have goals, objectives to what? Enhance the quality of the lives of their people. Leadership is not a monarchy. It's that you have vision, you have something to give to the people. You have to, upgrade the lives of your people so that you will now create legacies for yourself. 50 years, we can't do anything technologically, scientifically, though. But within those periods of the Civil War, 30 months, things happened. We couldn't just build on those things. Why? Although we can import things, and that's all.
Any complex matter, you cannot handle it.
And like one of us observed.
Wonder now, indigenously handled.
Okay, General Biako, thank you very much. We will return to you in the course of the conversation. And just to indicate that we have a senior citizen who has joined us in the studios now for this conversation. He's General Jones Akpa, and is National President of the Nigerian Legion. General Akpa, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now, just before we give you the opportunity of making your initial comments, and why still on the points raised by the other guests, more particularly General Biako a while ago, I would like to return to Professor Omar Opate at Kano Network Center. Professor Omar Opate, well, issues that have come up now relate to multiculturalism, and there's been an indication that, there's been a failure on the part of leadership to help wed all of us together. But still, some would argue that there is a much bigger role for communication in a multicultural environment, which is one of the issues, of course, you pursue in your writings. Have we sufficiently leveraged on our media power, soft power of our nation, to ensure that we get wedded together?
Thank you very much, Kingsley. Going back to what Professor Osadolo earlier mentioned, in nation, apart from when you're talking about nation building, there are two aspects. Apart from the physical aspect of laying infrastructure and developing physically, you also need a positive attitude in the minds of the people. And in a country like ours, where we are highly diverse, made up of different segmentations in terms of ethnicity, in terms of religion, in terms of almost everything you can think of. Politically, we are diverse. Now, this is where you need the elite to take the lead. And the media is part of the intellectual elite that is supposed to focus on the minds of people, giving them orientations towards a desired direction. But the question is, have we or our political elites, have they been able to develop a direction for which the media can buy into and thereby lead the people? The answer may not be completely yes. Well, we started well after the Civil War. If you could remember, we started building institutions, coming up with programs for a positive direction for the entire nation. But the subsequent years, particularly in recent years, and with developments in the internet, the media, and expansion in our population, it has become increasingly clear that our political elites are operating in deficit. Now, look at our political parties. How are they organized? How do they operate? And how are our elections conducted? And this is in the purview of the political elites. If the kind of things we see in our elections, if the kind of things that we see in our governance system come to issues of appointments, how is the bureaucracy set up? How are things being done? All of these things and the various conflicts and differences that erupt between the elites, or what you call intra-elite conflicts, are naturally captured, reflected, and reproduced in the content of our media, which again gives direction onto the rest of the society in terms of opinion formation. And when these elites, either because they have lost power, either because they are involved in heavy corruptive activities, decide to mislead the rest of the society, they have total control on the media. And then the media will now take this information, send it down, and further confuse the people by dividing them along ethnic lines without really knowing the intention of the elites and the leaderships. Now, at a point, radio stations, TV stations, and newspapers were taken over by the federal government or by state governments. I still remember the press release issued during the Obasanjo regime taking over Daily Times, New Nigerian, and some radio and TV stations are setting up the NTA. Specifically, the issue of national integration was mentioned, taking over our universities and polytechnics. The issue of national integration was mentioned, so that after the Civil War, the regions were abolished, and anything to do with regionalism, they were all, at least, that's why you abolish things like ICSA and others, so that the whole nation will be thinking of Nigeria. Unfortunately, if you look at the regional groupings that we have today, are populated by the elites and the political players. They are the people who are promoting either regionalism, promoting statism, promoting going back to local government settings. And these are the same people also who go to the national platform to claim leadership. And again, if you look at how the history of this nation today is being violently rewritten by people who played very active roles either in the Civil War or in the leadership of this country in the past years. You see the way they speak on newspapers, to newspapers, they speak on radio or sometimes on television, sometimes distributing lies and trying to create some level of ignorance in the minds of Nigerians as against the kinds of deprivations that we have. So our attitudes, of course, can only be changed through the media, but the media also takes direction from the quality of elites and leadership that we have in the country. Unfortunately, like I've said, I'm not sure if they have been able to create a clear direction that every Nigerian can say, this is where we're heading to, and this is what we're aiming at. So you cannot just blame the media alone. And our situation is further compounded with the social media. Our younger people who are coming up today do not even know anything about the history of this country, not even just about the history of the Civil War, because we are so localized and compartmentalized in our own settings. We no longer crisscross across the nation for so many obvious reasons. So because of that, with the social media and the decline in the capacity, strength, and economic power of the conventional media that we have, what do we have? You have people who do not know Nigeria becoming producers of information, becoming gatekeepers on their own, and becoming major controllers of opinion formation channels through the social media. Unfortunately, we do not produce counter-narratives. Rather, what we are talking about is how do we control? But rather, how do we maximize the use of this social media for positive purposes? How do we create counter-narratives? How do we now also create other bases that could give our people a sense of belonging? How do we make our institutions really diversified? How do we attract international scholars? How do we send our people out to international universities? How do we also take people from one part of the country to go and school in other parts of the country? How do we take intellectuals from one part to some other part? Then through that we exchange positive information about Nigeria. How do we promote our media institutions like the NTA to be fully financed so that they could engage in the production of national documentaries and make people to know what Nigeria is so that they could believe in Nigeria? I remember there was a time some debate started in some newspapers. Is Nigeria worth dying for? If they ask you, can you be willing to die for Nigeria?
All right, Professor Pat, thank you indeed for that robust contribution of yours. If we have time, we will return to you. But of course, Kingsley has introduced General Jones Abba, who is the national president of Nigerian Legion. So once again, let's welcome you.
Thank you very much.
We are talking about lessons learned from the Civil War. How can this nation move forward? What's your input?
Thank you very much for that question, and I'm sorry for every other thing. You see, we have learned some lessons. And when people talk about Uganda, about other people who have passed through, how many countries have had what we have that are still countries today? The fact that we are all together today, and the fact that the government and every other person, including the media, have brought it for all of us to know that the way forward is to be together. The only country we have is Nigeria. If you compare America, Europe, Asia, and other countries, they have their problems. We have done well up to now. It's not just about leadership, it's about everybody. It's like a machine. If you have an automobile, everything must work together to move forward. So let us talk to ourselves. Let's forget whatever has happened. The Civil War, other things that happened, those who took part, most of them are gone. People who are now talking about ethnicity, about this, they were not even there. Some of us, we didn't really see the Civil War. So let us forget about it and move forward. Rwanda, when I was at the War College, we had some of the participants from there. They told us their problems. We learned from there. There's no way, at the end of the day, we'll still go back to the round table to talk. We must go back to the round table to talk. So why can't we talk right now and continuously? It's not only leadership, it's followership. It's followership, and people who take advantage of the naivety of those other people who don't really know what they are talking about. Some of these people, when we sit down in gatherings and then we discuss. You see, Nigeria is only one of the places. Do people discuss and fight? We all discuss and we talk. We have freedom to talk, to discuss. So we have learned lessons, even at the time, I think when General Gowon's time. Even them, they were all quite young. When the war finished, what happened? Everybody embraced themselves. We should have continued from there and move forward. Nigeria is the only country we have. People have let us stop watching our dirty linens. They are not even very dirty. It's a question of accepting that we are together as a country from time to now. We are still Nigeria. Let us sing the Nigerian song. Let us not talk about our bad habits. Other countries have their own too. And I must thank the press and almost everybody, because the cooperation we have had, the enlightenment of why we are doing what we are doing now is so much. I don't think it has happened like that. So I'm sure from now on, let's keep watching. Nigeria has come. Nigeria will remain. And we thank God for unity, peace, and prosperity. That's the only way we can move forward.
All right, General Jones, thank you very much there for your comments. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll take some of the tweets that have come in and then return to our guests.
My name is Balaunti. I'm the Managing Director of Petroleum Product Marketing Company, a subsidiary of NNPC. There are significant price discrepancy between Nigeria and its neighbors across Africa. There's a discrepancy of between 150 to 250 naira. That creates an incentive for arbitrage, whereby smuggling triumphed by taking petroleum products across the neighbors so that they can be sold at higher price. While the smugglers are making the money, Nigeria is paying for it. And that payment is distorting everything that we do in terms of planning, in terms of our ability to fund, and thereby taking money that is meant for development. The introduction of this Operation White will have a reduction of close to 6 million liters on a daily basis, which if you take an average of 150, translate to a saving of over 1 billion naira every day. That is the benefit of Operation White, and we have started seeing the great benefit.
Chief, good morning, sir. You are here already?
No, now my spirit there, my body there for house. What kind of question is that? Were you not the one that fixed this meeting for 8 a.m.? You are now coming by 10 a.m. and start asking me jab questions.
But Chief, now, I'm sorry. Don't you also go late for meetings sometimes? You know now, African time.
No more African time. And no more pancaking of face during office hours. At the end of the day, we will lose valuable time. We will not make progress. If we want to move this nation forward, we must treat business as business and respect time. Change begins with me.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. Can we go for the meeting now, Chief?
Better.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
On NTA Network this Saturday, the Premier League, brought to you by Coca-Cola and Access Bank.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Kirian, we still have our guests at our network centers, Kano and Benin, as well as, of course, General Biako with us via Skype from New York City.
Yeah, and I want to take on Professor Sadalo once more, who is now at Benin Network Center. Professor Sadalo, you raised a lot of issues, in your first comment, and I would like you to expatiate on that as well. In this nation, we have had several development plans, but I'm not sure that those plans came to fruition with respect to the objective for which they were established at different times. There was this proposition by the late Vice President of Nigeria at his time, that's Dr. Alex Ekweme, which he propounded, and that the nation should have 6 zones, which was actually adopted during the Abuja conference, that we should have 6 regions, 6 vice presidents, and a president. And then there will be no need for National Assembly, for instance, because, of course, the Assembly will go down to the different regions. He did that with respect to find a solution to governance of this country. Some think that the nation is too huge to have power concentrated at the center, and that's also drawing Nigeria back in terms of development. What's your take on this?
Let me begin with the first issue that you raised about national development planning. In this country, Nigeria, our first national development plan was 1945 to 1955. Then, of course, through that period to independence and the First Republic, the colonial heritage of national planning. And since then, the nation had built its plans based on its colonial experience. Today, as we speak, there is no national development planning in Nigeria. If there is, I want to see a copy of that. 2, the whole essence of a budget is to address specific issues and programs and perhaps government's commitments to its financial obligations in every year. But that's not planning. Planning is either short-term or long-term. What we hope to achieve in the next 4 years or 5, and what we plan to achieve in the next 10 years, that is planning. Having a national vision of where Nigeria will be in the next 10 years from today. So those ones are not being addressed as at now. The second issue you raised about late Ekweme's suggestion of good governance and addressing the issue of competition, politics, power, and struggle for political space is to have a president and have 6 vice presidents. That is not a workable solution. If for any reason we have seized your political zones to address specific problems in each geopolitical zone, southwest, south-south, southeast, north-central, northeast, northwest. That is different from creating 6 vice presidents. It's not viable at all. We're looking at a workable framework for this country. In other words, when we look at the future political development of Nigeria, have we been able to address the problems of true federalism and resource control in this country? Have we been able to utilize and mobilize our resources through political participation for development? These are issues that should concern us. You see, by the time you say you have 1 vice president from this geopolitical zone and the other, you create 6 of them like that, you are merely increasing the economic burden of politics, even as we have today in the Fourth Republic. And I think that is not visible. I'm a Nigerian. I'm proud to be in Nigeria. I believe in the future of Nigeria. And there are others who strongly believe that this country is a great country. Our problem is, how do we mobilize the enormous human resources we have at our disposal. We have human resources, we have natural resources, we have national resources. How are we able to mobilize all of this for the purpose of development and building our national society and our nation?
Professor Sadolo, while you are still on the building of a viable and prosperous nation, that's to say for us, Nigeria, I would like you to throw in the example of Germany. General Jones Akpa here did say that, look, various countries have their own problems, no matter how big or no matter how strong or prosperous they are. Germany was a divided society until the advent of Otto von Bismarck. And of course, you have some experience in Germany where you went to school. What can we learn from the German experience?
Well, the German experience is a true federalism. For example, in Germany, there are 16 federating states of the Federal Republic of Germany. And every federating unit of the German Republic is independent of one another. They mobilize their resources for the development of that particular state. You don't take resources, for example, from, say, Westphalia and go and invest in Hamburg, or you take from Berlin and go and invest in Bonn. That is their peculiar experience, and it's working for them. The kind of politics that federalism also suggests to us in Nigeria is that it is not presidential. It is parliamentary kind of government where resources of governance are minimized to ensure that a lot is mobilized for economic development, physical structures in Germany. And that is the kind of thing that we should learn in Nigeria. I don't strongly believe that we can cope with the presidential system of government in Nigeria. In Germany, it's parliamentary, as most European countries. And they are able to keep valuable resources in terms of their monies and finances to other projects that will be of benefit to their citizens in terms of basic infrastructure. Look at Nigeria, for example. Virtually every home today is the sinking of borehole. The state is failing woefully to provide ordinary water for its citizens. The state cannot provide water. The state cannot ensure that electricity is provided even for common business. Nigeria today, the climate problem that we are facing today in Nigeria is as a result of the thousands and thousands of generators that have been imported.
Professor Osolo, we can feel your pulse, in that explanation. What worked or works for Germany may not actually work here. That was why Ekweme theorized on something he felt could work for us because of our peculiarities. If states cannot provide water, because the states cannot control their resources, that is what our constitution says. Thank you very much indeed. Now back to Abuja here, where we have the president of the military retirees, General Abba. Let's talk about your people, your members. How are they faring? We heard from some widows of fallen heroes who complained bitterly of not being properly catered for. Some have not even received the normal monument or whatever they have to receive based on the fact that they lost their husbands. So what is the situation?
Thank you very much for that question, and it's very apt at this time. The Nigerian Legion was created in 1962, and the government that created it at that time saw it necessary to enable them perform certain functions and roles to improve the lives of the veterans, the widows, the widowers, their dependents. And that is why the Nigerian Legion does not receive subvention from government as it were, to perform our roles. And that is why they gave us that opportunity to develop certain things, to cater for ourselves, all of us, not just ourselves, but even for the country. We are allowed by the Act of Parliament that created it to operate all legitimate businesses, including television stations, radio stations, factories, manufacturing, agriculture, inland waterways, build estates, even including specialist hospitals that take care of the problems of the aged, the scholarship for people. It's there. What has failed is that it has not been utilized. But when I came on board, I opened up the place to everybody, all comers, inclusive. First of all, make it all the tri-services, Army, Navy, Air Force, and even other parastatals like the customs, the immigrations, we should all work together. When we must put back all those people to school. We are affiliated to the World Veteran Federation. And the World Veteran Federation, there are huge people who contribute and donate materials, intellectual and everything to the Legion. That's what we are doing now. We were in Indianapolis for a conference, and within that conference, we're already making partners with people who have promised to come and help us. All we need is for the state government, the federal government, local governments to give us land so that we can develop this aspect of things. And also, very importantly, is that before now, there was no real data on where the veterans are, who they are, their status, and we must have data, and which we have already opened up. And with that, we should know where you are so we can help you. There are people that we help 100%. There are people that we help depending on. Those who are even rich, they also contribute. And
on the widows that have complained, I want to talk about that.
Well, that's why I say the widows. The widows should sort out themselves. We are doing it because you are a widow. Nigerian Legion, we don't talk about rank anymore. We're out of service. Let the widows who are in the leadership admit that Nigerian Legion is all equal. We all should contribute.
Okay, General Akpat, thank you very much. We earlier indicated that we have a number of tweets. We're going to take those tweets now, Kirian, very quickly. Dada Stephen says, 50 years after the event that shook the foundation of this country, we haven't really looked into the state of our union. The outcome of the 2014 National Conference should be reviewed.
Now, from Tatos Mondeok, he says, please, no nation that goes into war can come out strong. The recuperating process is tremendously uncalculable and never should be thread the path of war.
Okay, now, Akeju Olagbaju tweets, over 60% of the population, particularly the youth, may not know how deep the wound was, but only saw the healing scar. Never should it happen again.
Ibrahim Modu Aji, with the coming of social media, there is a threat to our unity, which our fallen heroes fought for. The divisiveness on the social media is getting alarming these days. Fake news and hate speech is the biggest threat to our unity. Let there be unity and peace. Never again.
Now, Badamasi Haruna Adamu has this tweet, never again, we have come of age. And to all the heroes that never came back home, rest in peace.
Now, those who witnessed the great human and material losses of that war never proved to have such harrowing experience again.
Sani Michael Amakoji, those who see war as an alternative to the agitation would rather choose negotiation if they all knew the effect of war.
All right, Festus Akimbo, our political leaders and those in government leadership positions must be committed to justice, equality and equity across Nigeria so that the things that made the civil war possible 50 years ago can be nipped in the bud.
Ayola Tawhid Adeni tweets, I pray that the civil war will not come to Nigeria again, but the level of insecurity is too much in the country. This is of great concern.
Well, what should be away from this program? Well, of course, Ibrahim Tudu.
Joseph.
Ibrahim Tudu asked a question here, which I'm prepared to answer. He wants to know whether our guest in Benin, Professor Salalo, has a relationship with my colleague here, Kinsley. The answer is yes. He's actually the elder brother of my colleague here in the studio, and of course, it's an honor that we have him on this program this morning. So that's for Ibrahim Tudu.
That's the mischief of the producer, by the way. All right, Joseph has another tweet. I want to take Joseph as well.
Yes, go ahead.
It says the main focus of the Civil War, out of the Civil War, is for government to take care of the regional grievances and, above all, faithfulness as a panacea to a free environment.
Now, Pen Praise says, in my opinion, Nigeria is yet to learn from the Civil War, as those factors that aggravated the cause of the war have not been handled well. Injustice, discrimination, tribalism are still practiced by the favored.
Okay, and last but not the least is from Shehu Oladimeji. The Civil War must not be seen as one of attrition, but rather an attempt to keep Nigeria from disintegration. Our political leaders must spend their energy more on matters that unite us than those that divide us, because Nigeria will remain an indivisible entity. All right. So it's on that note we would like to thank all our guests who have been with us in this conversation today. From New York, we were joined by. All right. Now I understand that we can immediately get the Skype from our Benin Network Center. I would like to thank Professor Benson Osadolo, Professor of History and International Relations at the University of Benin. Thank you for being with us on the program today. And in Kano, Professor Umaru Pate, Professor of Mass Communication and also Dean of the School of Postgraduate Studies. Prof, thanks a lot for your insight. And from New York via Skype, our deep appreciation to General Obiako. General Obiako, of course, he fought in the Civil War on the Biafran side and also later was a member of the Nigerian Armed Forces. He is currently on an assignment under the offices of the Secretary General of the United Nations as head of a board of inquiry into incidents in northeast Syria. General Obiako, thanks a lot for being with us today. Also here in Abuja studios, National President, Nigerian Legion, General Jones Akpa. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, sir.
And last but not the least, former Director of Military Intelligence, General Akbe Tijani Jibrin. Thanks a lot for being with us on the program this morning.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
All right, Kieran.
Yes, and that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. We thank you so much for being part of the show. Please come back again tomorrow for another edition. My name is Kieran Umayo.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. Have a nice day.